So if we are not able to solve it through UX, what exactly are we doing?
If we really want to solve that problem, Shanika, right, it's multiple touch points.
Is that enough to become a CX designer?
When we talk about customer experience, it's not just about that one interaction, it's multiple interactions.
Also, the user doesn't know what they want.
Why is that? Is it because I have some data to back that up?
So when it's so long, low fidelity and mid fidelity and high fidelity, you've done 3 phases of that.
And it's way too much content to go through. Really got to think about the person looking at that.
Like, do you also reject the perfect portfolios and you're looking for more realistic ones?
In my opinion.
Warren Nugent, welcome to In Perspective.
Hi, how you doing, Shanika? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So you have a decade full of experience in UX design. Could you tell me something about your journey?
Yeah, no, it's just funny when you always say like a decade or over a decade. It's just like, yeah, it's hard to believe it's gone in that time. But yeah, look, I mean, I started my career out mainly in digital design. That was where I kind of started out. So like, making content, web design, pages, emails, banners, and things like that.
Graphics.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the term you call it now is digital designer. That's probably the best kind of term for it nowadays. I think back then, it was a very different time and the role was kind of known, but it wasn't as well known as it is today. I like the idea of innovating and thinking about things on a broader scope versus just focusing on what I'm, a monotonous role, which I felt was monotonous at the time, day to day, just doing the same thing. So that was why I really wanted to channel my career into UX design. And I worked on getting my first role. And from there, I just kind of worked my way up and then got to the point where, it was time to decide, as all designers do, whether they want to go into leadership or do they want to just continue working on some of the best projects. I kind of went down the leadership role and that's where I am today.
One thing that my manager told me that it's leadership, it's taken, it's not given. That we cannot just one day give the designation and then you start behaving like a leader. But maybe you can talk more about that. Like, how can we transition into a leader?
Yeah, I like that thinking of it's taken, not given, right? And I think a lot also depends on situation and circumstance. I think if I look at my situation back then, I was kind of put into the opportunity of leading someone. So
you're positioned in that way.
Exactly. Like I said, a lot depends on the situation. But moving the situation aside, if you do know that you want to go into leadership, it's something that you are 100% sure about and you feel that's the next step in your career. I think there are lots of ways that you can kind of really channel your career down that path, right? Firstly, learning a bit about leadership, because it's not as simple as just, taking a few people and, starting to manage them, right? I think you've got to understand that a lot kind of goes into this, understanding your team, understanding about that you're no longer focusing on the day-to-day projects, you're now focusing on the team setup. When you take that next step into leadership, because there is a slight difference, right, between the management side of things and the leadership side of things.
People management.
Yeah, so I guess a people manager focuses more on, making sure that the team are the most optimal in what they're currently doing on the day-to-day, and actually they might be really close to the projects, whereas a leader focuses a lot more on the structural changes of the team, focusing more on with stakeholders, making sure that, there is a vision for the team and we know exactly the direction the team is going to be going in. So there's a little bit more that kind of comes into that leadership side of things.
One thing I found really interesting in the profile was somewhere I've seen airline UX is something that you have an expertise in, because we don't really have an exposure. I didn't even think about airline UX. Usually, we're working on mobile apps and websites. How is it so different?
Yeah, I worked in airline for about 2.5 years. And I think the reason you say that, that it's an area that people don't know too much about because it spans across quite a lot of different touch points, right? It's not just the application on the website to sell tickets. It's also, a lot of internal tools, back-end tools as well to kind of help the teams to deliver certain experiences. It might even be different kind of platforms that you might also work on. It's not always just website and mobile, right? It might actually be like a kiosk, for example, which I've done in the past where, we might have to work on enabling customers to do their bag checking and things like that on a kiosk.
Physical product design.
Exactly. So where you kind of work on a lot of different aspects, right?
Is the process same? Like the design frameworks we have, the design thinking process and the double diamond, is it same for physical product design?
Correct. Yeah, it's exactly the same, And even if you're a designer that hasn't worked in airline before, there's no reason you can't go into that industry, right?
Okay.
You know, it's still using your design thinking, your design methodologies that have served you well before,
Right.
but applying it to this. And, you know, and even if you were talking about like selling online,
Right.
it's still essentially e-commerce, you know, it's right. It's like, instead of selling products, we're just selling seats, right? You're selling customer seats, right? So it's all the same. It's just, you know, slightly different industry and lots of learning around airline as well. You know, like, there's a lot to learn in terms of how planes operate, how the business works, you know, understanding about different code shares and all
Yeah.
these kind of things, right?
When you're working for airline UX, what kind of problem statements you're receiving?
Yeah, like I guess some of the problem statements there might be around, you know, how do we make sure that customers are able to, you know, do their bag check-in, for example, without having to go to the counters, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole point of having that kiosk is to reduce the amount of traffic coming into that area, right? So that we
Yeah.
don't increase the load of wait times and people,
Right.
you know, spending a long time waiting for bag check-in. So that's the problem statement. So how can we reduce that with the kiosk, right? So how do we make sure that customers are able to do the same thing, but without that support that they would have had from someone doing it themselves? So a great example is, you know, the tag that you put on your bag, right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
it makes sure that it's
Yes.
scanned when it goes through the scanner.
Yes.
You know, if there's no one doing that for you, you need to make sure that it's clear for a customer to know, okay, I need to actually loop this around my handle and then stick it on there and
Right.
so on, right? So
Intuitive.
exactly.
Yeah.
So how can we do that with experience and the screens and, you know, maybe animations or ways to explain to customers what they need to do next and how to do it the right way?
A designer who doesn't have the domain expertise may or may not be able to deliver the best solution to this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
How do we get the domain expertise?
yeah, that's a great question. I think, look, with any role you go into, there is always a learning curve of the domain area, because every business operates differently. But with airline, like you said, I think it's a bit more of a learning curve because there is a lot of domain knowledge around that. So it's going to take you about a year or so to really get your head around how an airline operates.
I think the way I'm learning about domain, like I was working for Dell and they pushed me in a logistic project, and I have no idea about the pipeline of how logistics UX works. So the way I've learned it is, I don't think it's a very good way of learning it. But they gave me a book and I started reading the book. I don't think that is the most effective way to learn about the domain. Should be some other way. Like if tomorrow I want to get into airline UX, what are the basic steps that I can take, at least the initiative, to get into that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, you know, communication is key, you know, with your stakeholders and people you're working with. I think with any new role, you've really got to make sure that first 6 months, you're really getting yourself into communicate with people, understanding the business, and really just making sure that you're just rapidly speeding up your knowledge so that you can kind of start to really understand what's being spoken about, you know, around you. Yeah.
Can you tell me the difference between UX and CX?
Yeah, look, I think the terminology has changed a lot over the years, but essentially when we talk about user experience or UX, we're speaking about very specific interactions, right? And if we stick with the airline example, I guess UX, when we're talking about that, it might be the interaction that I have with the application to book a seat, right? Or book a flight. But when we talk about customer experience, it's not just about that one interaction. It's multiple interactions that you have, right? It's booking the seat, but it's then getting to the airport, checking in your bags. It's then finding the gate. It's then getting your ticket. It's then going on the plane.
It's
then
customer journey.
Exactly. It's a full end-to-end customer journey with multiple interactions. And I guess the metrics are also different as well, you know, because
Metrics doesn't?
as in the way that we measure if we're doing the right thing, you know, as in when we talk about UX metrics, it's like, are we, stick with the booking seat example, right? Have we effectively allowed customers to book a seat quickly, efficiently, you know, the time on the page, you know, the add to bag rate and so on, right? So those metrics are very specific to that specific interaction. When we're talking about customer experience metrics, it's the end to end, like we said, right? It's that whole journey. So we're then starting to think about things like net promoter score, customer satisfaction scores, and you know, customer experience is measured also over a long period, over a lifetime, right? A life cycle of a customer. So that's also important to really think about as well when we talk about, you know, the difference between UX and CX. Also, the measurement's different. It's also the period, and it's also, what we're kind of looking at as well for our customers.
When somebody's getting hired as a CX designer, will the their work on a daily basis would be kind of similar like a UX designer? Do we follow the same UX frameworks, like the design thinking process? Is it the same in CX or is it different?
Yeah, a lot depends on the expectations of that CX designer for that specific company. Every company sets themselves up differently, but essentially, I think when we talk about CX, a lot of it is about capturing insight, from the different touch points that we have, and really finding out what are the areas that we should be focusing on. So, for example, we'll stick with the airline again, right?
That's the best.
Yeah, let's say that
Yeah.
we get some feedback that a lot of customers are really struggling to find their gate, for example, right? Now, maybe from a digital UX experience, there might not be a lot that we could do specifically
an
in the
app?
app. Maybe we
Yeah.
could actually. Maybe there are a lot of opportunities. Maybe we could actually guide them in the app, or there's loads of ways we could solve that problem. But essentially, the customer experience is really understanding and prioritizing some of those pain points, right? And if that one's coming up really high, that's an area we should focus on. And then it's like, how do we solve that problem for our
How do
different
we do
channels?
that? How do we do that in CX? So if app is not coming to the picture, it's not as efficient as the customer experience, then what exactly we are doing differently that is making it easier or solving the problem actually?
Yeah. And that's where, data's key then. It's like, okay, we've identified an area or a pain point. Now let's dig a bit deeper into that problem and understand a bit more about it, right? Like what's actually causing it. And that's where data is going to be key. And we're not just talking about like, numerical data or quantitative data. We're also talking about qualitative data as well, right?
There's a lot of surveys involved in it.
Exactly. Can we speak to our customers? Can we maybe do some usability tests, or can we, really understand what is it specifically about this issue about not finding the gate that is causing the biggest problem,
So once we find out that in CX, just after understanding all of these things, after doing the research, understanding what is the problems, how can we solve, now what exactly are we doing? Are we designing, again, are we doing it in the app or are we doing something differently?
Well, this is what we're saying. It could be outside of the app, right? The app might be one touch point that we could use, but there could also be signage in the actual airport,
like that.
for example. Yeah. So
all
there could
the
be
physical
exactly.
things.
Yeah. And this is where now designers, we're starting to see a lot of designers now kind of not just focusing on the journey on the screen, right? They're also having to kind of really think about how can I marry the experience that I'm doing on a digital product and also in the store or in the airport, wherever it might be, right? Because if we really want to solve that problem, Shanika, right, it's multiple touch points. It's like, can I do something on the handset?
Yes.
Can I also do something in the physical airport?
It can be anything.
Could be anything, right? It could even be could we have someone to support people, right? Or can we look at the flow of traffic, right? Like where people are coming out from a certain point of checking in. Like, is there something in the terms of which part of the airport they're going? Or there could be lots of things around that, right?
So CX design is not only about on Figma, do something and then deliver it. I think it can be anything. Signage can be a board. It can be any physical product. Is it?
Yeah. Anything that elevates the customer experience, anything that can enhance how customers are interacting with the end-to-end journey that you have, and how they interact with your brand, and your services.
Right. So, so is there any specific expertise they need to have in order to become a CX designer? Do they need to know how to design physical products in order to get into CX, or they can just say that I'm a good problem solver, I'm a good researcher as well, I can understand things better and I can solve problems? Is that enough to become a CX designer?
Someone that works in CX may not necessarily actually be designing experiences. They might just be driving the insight, which then goes into the product teams to then solve those issues. There's lots of different setups that there could be. But I guess the key thing for anyone in CX is making sure that, you have strong relationship with stakeholders. You really understand about gathering data, gathering insight, really prioritizing that insight then in terms of, what's the biggest impact versus effort as well. All of these things kind of tie into that. So I think anyone can essentially get into customer experience if they understand like the fundamentals of it.
Without knowing design in general?
Definitely. I think because, if we talk about UX design specifically, again, it's quite a broad term when we talk about UX design, right?
So they don't necessarily need to be good at UI. They just need to understand things better and then understand the operation and have probably domain knowledge and research and just be a good problem solver probably.
Exactly.
So they don't
Yeah.
have to be a good UI designer. It's
Not necessarily. No.
not necessarily.
They can probably work with good UI designers in the team or whatever it might be. So yeah, not necessarily at all.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask, that because you are in leadership for a very long period of time, what you look for when you hire for designers?
Yeah, I think the key thing is it's important to look at the individual. Is this person going to be the right fit for our team? Is this person do they have the skills that we're looking for in terms of the role that and who they're going to work with in our team? So if I need someone that's going to be working with some maybe some tricky stakeholders or lots of different stakeholders, I want to make sure that this person great communication or is really good at kind of presenting. That will really change who we're looking for then, right? So you might be the best UI designer, but actually we're not looking for that. We're looking for someone that's a bit more maybe strategic or better at communication, like we said, right? So a lot depends on the role, where we see that role fitting as well. Because I think that's also a bit of a challenge that I've seen, or from people that I know that got hired is, I mean, sometimes you hire someone, but you don't know what they're going to be doing or where they're going to be. And I think it's important for us as leaders to be really clear about, why do we need this role?
Yeah.
Who and
do
where
we even
we're going
need
to put
it,
them.
like,
Exactly.
in the first place?
Do we even need it in the first place? So that we can have a clear vision for that person that's coming in. So then we have a clear vision of who we're looking for that role. If I look at it from the sense of someone that wants to get hired, it's important to make sure you have that portfolio. I know there's a lot of stuff on LinkedIn nowadays, with conflicting messages around the portfolio.
Right.
But in my personal opinion, I've always looked at that. For me personally, I think it's something that I've always kind of felt that, is this person able to brand themselves in a way, because they're going to be working on our brand for the company that we're working for, right?
We make sure they're good enough.
Exactly. Do they understand about branding? Do they understand about, making sure that it's easy to navigate their website, it's easy to find information that we're looking for? Does it showcase
Do they
some of the
have
great
their own
work?
products good enough?
Exactly, yeah. So for me, I think that answers a lot without even seeing the case studies yet, right?
What if they don't have the branding? What if they don't have the website? They're just like only have given you the case studies. One thing that I think a lot of people are going to ask this. So what are the criteria you have to select or reject the portfolios? What are the key touch points that because it happens like very quickly, like you filter out really, really quickly. You might be getting like thousands of case studies or portfolios. What are the checkpoints that you're checking and just quickly selecting or rejecting?
Yeah, look, I think the key thing is there's the three key aspects, right? One is the CV, one is the portfolio, then one is the LinkedIn profile. Those are the three key areas that you have to pretty much have spot on. Yeah. And I think if you have those three in a really good place, your chances increase massively. Does everything have to be 100% perfect? No, not necessarily. But I do think that really helps people to kind of narrow out good profiles from low profiles. And it's not always going to be your hiring manager that's going to go through all these, right? It's going to also be the recruiters. And, recruiters also will have a very specific requirement they're looking for. How do they make sure they're sifting through the right profiles? There are also algorithms on LinkedIn as well. So that's also something to make sure that you're getting your head around as well. Making sure you've got rich content, making sure it's up to date. You've got all the key skills and things like that in there as well, really important. So yeah, these three areas are super important.
But then specifically about portfolios, I had a conversation with a couple of my product managers, and not product managers, design managers, and they told me that we don't really select the perfect portfolios. The perfect, everything is done. Like in the process of design thinking, they have done everything and more.
Yeah.
But in reality, that doesn't really happen. So we know for a fact that that's not a real project. That's a dummy project. But I don't know if it's true, but that's how they are approaching it. So is it true? Like, do you also reject the perfect portfolios and you're looking for more realistic ones?
What do we consider perfect? That's the first question. There could
perfect,
be...
I would say the definition of perfect, it's like, it looks like you've got all the time in the world to do everything. Like your sprint is longer than anyone can ever imagine. Like you've got so much of flexibility. You've done the quantitative and qualitative research. You have like enough people to do that. And then you've done the low fidelity and mid fidelity and high fidelity. You've done 3 phases of that. It's practically impossible. I haven't done that when I'm actually working in a field.
Okay, so I see what you mean now. So more the actual
Yeah.
case study
Yes,
itself, the
yes.
length of it, right, and all the different
Right.
things they've done. Yeah, and that I do agree with. I agree
Yeah.
that again, it comes down to, for me, someone that would do that, or someone that has all that content, are they thinking about the end customer that's going to be actually looking at that portfolio? Because you're right, it's one, it's way too much content to go through. Two, yeah, there might be some skeptical views on it, but also it's like I would expect that person to really treat it like they would treat like a presentation. You don't focus on throwing everything in a presentation,
Right.
right? You focus on the key moments. What were the key parts of my project that I worked on that enabled me to reach success and solve the problem? Doesn't have to mean that I have to throw in everything out there. It's just the key moments, right? And I think you've really got to think about the person looking at that. You've got to think about the audience, and you've also just got to think about, how do I show the value quickly? If someone's going to be just skimming through this, how can I really show that I know what I'm doing? I know the process, but I'm showing the most important parts of the process that help me solve the problem.
Hold on, cut this part. It becomes confusing for new designers who have never worked in corporate or never worked in a firm, actually, who've never got hands on real projects. So they're just doing it out of the blue. Like whatever they've learned in the course, probably, or in a boot camp, they just got a problem statement from maybe from a lot of website
Yeah.
or revamp of a existing product, and they are doing the case study by themselves. No team involved, nobody guided, nothing happened. So in these case studies, you'll find unrealistic approach. How can they understand what to include and what not to include?
Yeah. It's a difficult one because everyone comes at different skill levels, right? So yeah, you're right. Someone starting out versus someone that's, been in the industry for like 5 or 6 years and worked at different companies, they can rely a lot more on their experience. So yeah, if someone coming in new, I would suggest that, yeah, you may not have the projects, but you still need to think about how you're presenting it, right? And how you're kind of showcasing things. Get the right balance. And one, I can't remember the name of the portfolio, but what I saw was amazing because I felt that that person had really thought about how the person that's going to be viewing this should look at it, right? So if I remember correctly, there was a few different kind of like, so you had the case study and there's like 3 call to actions, right? And one of them was like, view the full case study, view a short version, and then one
Oh,
was
that's
like,
so interesting. We can do that.
exactly, and then one was like, just
Yeah.
view the final designs or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So you were giving me the option to choose,
Yeah.
do I want to read the full end to end of these? Do I want to
Mm.
just read a short version, or I want to just see the final end product, right? And if I saw that in a portfolio, I would say to myself, yeah, this person,
It
without
really
even looking at the
makes
case
sense.
study, yeah,
Yeah.
without even looking at the case study, they
Yeah.
understand good
Yeah.
experience, right? They understand what they're trying
Right.
to do.
It's very interesting. I don't think that the given tools like Behance and Dribble, we don't really have the option to do that.
Yeah,
But then if you have a personal website, then we can definitely
exactly.
give them the options. Is there anything specific that you wish that they would have understood it so that it would have been easier for the business to, operate?
So this is a great point to cover because I think it is something that I have seen a lot lately. There is this challenge that we're seeing now where designers want a bit more of, I don't want to say the term, but the seat at the table, right? Because
Yes.
that's what the big
Yeah.
topic is, the getting the seat at the table and understanding what it is we're going to be driving. And I think it's about what advice I would give designers is maybe be quite flexible in that, Yes, it's important to get the seat at the table if we don't have it. Yes, it's important to make sure that we're being involved at critical phases of a project, but that might not always be the case. And do you always need to be involved at every phase? Because it's going to hinder your time to actually solve that problem as well. If you're in all these meetings, all these schedulings and things like that.
Do they have the luxury to actually skip it or decide that I want to join these, but I don't want to join these meetings?
In the ideal world, yes, right? Ideally, that would be perfect, right? If you could
Yeah, that would
decide.
have been wonderful, but
You don't always know though, right? Because sometimes you'll skip a meeting, but actually there might be something really important in that session that you've missed, right? So again, it's about building good relationships with the people that are in that meeting to kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to join this one because I need to focus on something. But if anything comes up, can you let me know about what's kind of happening in this, or if anything I need to know of? And that's where building a strong relationship with your product manager or with the different team members that you're working with is super crucial. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be in every single meeting and, you have to have a seat at the table. Sometimes it's about making sure that you're able to deliver the best experience, but equally making sure that you're also able to guide the business in the right direction at the right pivotal points of that as well, which can be a bit difficult to balance, But I think sometimes if you're so focused on getting a seat at the table, you miss out sometimes on the important parts, which are delivering. But then equally, that's where my job kind of comes in, right? Is that it's important to make sure that we have the right setup in the team where there are people that are able to kind of focus more on the delivery part. There are still people focusing more on the strategy, or if we are set up in a way that we want people to do a bit of both, how do we make sure that the process, the cadence is right? And how do we make sure the team are all aligned on how that process should be as well?
So the thing is, there are two type of designers I've seen after working. It's like one of the designers don't really have opinion. They're gonna do exactly what the product managers or the management is saying. Then there is another type of designer who has an opinion. They're gonna talk back and forth and say, hey, I have logic, this is the reason why I did it, so if you're gonna change it, you need to convince me why you want that change. So which type of designers are you more likely to hire?
So I think definitely the designer that has more of an opinion. And
Because
I
it's
say
so
that
conflicting. It's a conflicting thought that you don't want somebody who is arguing in the organization. You want that person to be likable and everyone is just happy around that person. But also you don't want somebody to agreeing with everything, anything and everything.
yeah, and I think this is again comes
What
back
should
to
we
that.
do like to get hired?
Yeah, look, I think this comes back to that point about the individual, because that same personality, those two same personality traits you spoke about there, could be applied to any role, not just
Yeah.
designers.
Yes, it can be.
And, I think every person that kind of comes into a business or an organization, you need to be flexible, right? There's going to be times when you do have to put your foot down and say, I don't think this is the right way to go. But then there's going to be other times as well when you do have to kind of be like, you know what, actually, this is just an MVP. We are going to actually have multiple iterations of this. Maybe for now, we're not getting in exactly what we want.
But it also depends on the organization, right?
Yeah.
In startups, they're going to be hurrying up, like just launch the MVP. But in the MNC, I think they would give you more time and make so many changes in the back end. So just don't make random decisions very quickly.
Exactly. And even in an agency, you might want to sometimes you might, to support the client, you may actually have to give your opinion and say, actually, look, this isn't, I know you guys are thinking about this going this way, but actually this might not be the right way to go. It could cause X, Y, and Z problem. But again, I feel like with any kind of argument you bring, any designer, I think sometimes it's very easy just to kind of say, oh, this isn't right, or this is the best practice, or this is the reason why. But what evidence are you bringing to the table, right? So what information are you actually bringing to the table to kind of explain your rationale? And the reason I say that is because I think every designer should really think about their role as if they were like a lawyer.
Okay, I wanted to know.
Well, the reason I say that is because, lawyers, it's not about what a lawyer thinks. It's about what the evidence is saying, all right? And it's not even about the actual crime that was committed.
Yeah.
It's like what evidence is there to support the argument. And I think designers need to also do the thing. Exactly, the logic that comes with that, right? So if I'm proposing to do something a different way, why is that? Is it because I have some data to back that up? Is it because I've spoken to X amount of customers and I've got some feedback where they're calling this out? It makes that decision or your opinion a lot more valid, right? And you're going to win over the jury a lot more if you have some key evidence, right? So I think that's also important, and I think we have all the tools as designers to do it, right? We speak to customers, we can work with data analysts, we can come up with different options and actually run tests or A/B tests to kind of prove which version works versus another one. So use the tools to your advantage to kind of drive your opinion if you have one, right? And don't be so opinionated. If the data's saying no, or if it's actually saying the conflicting thing that you're thinking, make sure that you're really also going with that as well.
There are a lot of conflicting thoughts like this. Like, I feel like it's difficult for us to understand the expectation that they have when they're hiring. It's like, it's not written in the JD. They need XYZ, we have it, but then you have also a different set of expectations that we don't know, that you might be looking for. How do we get there, and understand that? Because it's a struggle, is what I feel.
Yeah. There's only so much you can kind of include in the JD. But that's where I think it's important it's not just the job description, it's also the hiring process as well. And that's something that, over the years, I've really got myself involved with. I don't just give it to the HR team to focus on, right? I make sure that I'm part of that and crafting out that hiring process, because I want this person to meet my team members. I want to meet them as well. And I want to make sure that we're giving them the information as well. Like, do they understand what the expectation is of them? Like you said, right? They can ask those questions. They can get to know some of the team. We might sometimes give you a task as well, where we'll ask you questions about it and like how you did it. And maybe we can tell you a bit about how we would have solved it, if we would have done it this way. So I think that is also important, So yeah, it just depends on your hiring process. But if you have the opportunity to change it and put it in the right way, I would suggest to any leader to really craft that out.
Right. Do you conduct like design sprints? I think that there are two definitions to it. Like I have seen companies having Confluence Jira. You assign the task in Jira board, and then that is called sprint. But also there's a workshop kind of a thing. You get to do all the notes and then prioritize the features. You prioritize it. The more dots
Dot
you
voting.
I forgot the term. What does it say? The more dots you give, the more prioritizing. So it's a fun activity. The two definitions. Have you conducted these workshops like design sprint?
Yeah, done a bit of both. So 2 definitions, done both.
Yeah.
And I think the design sprint you're speaking about, that kind of comes from the Google design sprint. I think that's where they kind of coined that a little bit, and that's kind of where it's kind of come in there. But
if you've conducted that, what are the things you're incorporating in that process? Can you give me more idea about how the design sprint looks like, and how can you actually plan the design sprint?
Yeah, so I think usually those types of design sprints we like to do on a new kind of project where we have a bit of information, we know a bit about what we're doing, but we need to kind of do a little bit more investigation into how we might actually start to think about this, right?
Are we talking about revamping of the existing system, or
could be a whole new feature, could be a whole new capability,
product
or
together.
maybe even new software that we're kind of implemented into existing architecture we have. Could be lots of use cases. But what the great thing about doing it in that kind of workshop setting over a period of time, maybe it's like a week or 2 days, whatever it might be, it just really enables the team to fully focus on that specifically. Think about the end-to-end journey, and also it's not just about the output, right? But it's also about, do we have all the information? Like, do we know exactly what we want? And how are we going to measure success? How are we going to test it? How are we going to validate? So it's also about thinking about all those things as well, because that might require some work before we even start the design process on that project. Right? So those can be really good, and also they're a great way to get stakeholders also involved, because sometimes what I've seen in the past is that stakeholders might think they know what they want,
but they don't.
but they might not know, or they might not even realize the scope of what they want to do, right? And how big it is. And sometimes
they speak the business language, they don't understand the design.
Yeah, exactly. And getting them involved in that as well, really helping them to think and see how we're seeing it, helps them sometimes also. You can just see it when they're there, right? They see, oh wow, I didn't even think what I thought was this is now this, or now I have a lot more clarity on what we want to do, right?
What we want to do.
So it's great for that as well,
And I feel like this challenge of UX designers are two things. First of all, the stakeholder, if they're confused, they don't exactly know what they want. And especially I'm talking about startups. And then also the user doesn't know what they want. So like when you're doing the qualitative interview, they just get very serious. They think that it's an interview, I need to say everything right. But then you don't have to. You just have to be you. That's what we want. That we want the data. I mean, we want to analyze you and this. So when people don't know what they want, when we are getting the requirement and the people who are designing for, then designers get a lot of pressure. Like, we are confused now. How do we like cater to this?
I think sometimes designers, we don't look at the person behind. Why are they being so difficult? Why are these challenges coming up? Why are they bringing these things to the table? Why are they surfacing certain things? And
their journeys are different, so their belief systems are different, their experiences are different.
Exactly. And they might be getting pressure, or they might be a certain number they're chasing or something, right? So sometimes it's really about like first understanding that individual, like step away from the work, step away from everything, like understand what their requirements are, what is it that they're after, understand that person. And that will help you to understand, am I wasting time? Or am I doing this the wrong way? Am I speaking this person the wrong way? Or am I kind of coming at this at the wrong angle? Should I be maybe proposing, if this someone's very focused on numbers and metrics, maybe I should be speaking to my data team to bring more numbers to the table, and then we can kind of win this person over. So there's a lot of things around that which are really important. I think I would definitely suggest that we empathize so much with the customers, but how much do we empathize with
within the
our
firm,
stakeholders and our business people that we're working with,
I don't think the young designers are actually, they won't get the pressure. I think they get the requirement from you, the design leaders or the product managers. So you come into the pressure, like the stakeholder doesn't know what they want. The users are a little like not exactly how we want them to be. So, and we have to get the problem statement refined for the junior level designers to work on.
Yeah.
The way to do it is only to build relationships and then communicate back and forth.
Yeah.
We actually do it anyway, but because of that, like there are a lot of changes. Because of that, there are a lot of failures. So we're back and forth. We're coming back and iterating and doing again. We are going back and iterating. How can we minimize the process of making so many changes?
Yeah.
Is there a way?
This is a great point. And I think what you mentioned there is a consequence of not involving people at the right time. There will be times or parts in a project where, you know what, this is a session where we need to have multiple people in it.
Yeah.
So we're all aligned and we know what direction we're going in.
Yeah.
And then maybe in a few weeks or months, there's an update that happens. Or, maybe we need to bring certain people that we talk about a certain update. Like we said, if we need the data.
Yeah.
Maybe the first catch up there is with the data people or whoever our stakeholders are, right? So it's about involving the right people at the right time and making sure that we're updating people on the process. So I think sometimes
everyone is on the same page.
Exactly. Everyone's on the same page. And look at the milestones, Maybe the first milestone is understanding what data we have. Maybe the next milestone is maybe playing back some user research findings. Maybe the next milestone is like the wireframes.
Yeah.
Because if you go to your stakeholders right at the end with the final solution, they don't feel part of it. They don't get it. And also it might not be what they're looking for. Whereas if you can kind of
involve them in the process.
Exactly, in the process, you can have less back and forth, less challenges, less problems, Yeah. And it will avoid the rework as well.
Also, Warren, you have your own podcast, right?
That's right. Yeah. So I started a podcast with my friend Jay Tullock. So it's called Beyond the Interface. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and a few other places.
What's the name of the podcast?
Beyond the Interface.
What is, I mean, I know it's about design, but what this is specifically about?
Yeah. So essentially the name Beyond the Interface was all about like us moving away from, the day-to-day, which is focused on, looking at interfaces and so on. But what we really like to do is touch on the really tough or hard topics. And we have a guest every 2 weeks, bi-weekly now. And we always revolve it around this very specific topic. It might be we get a guest that's very focused on analytics or maybe focused on leadership, maybe UI or design system specifically. So, we like to cover each episode revolves around design, but it has a different theme, I think it's just been good for me also as a leader to kind of, get to learn because you get to a point in your career where it's like, who do you learn from? So it's actually learning from your peers and other people that you speak to. You can gain some great knowledge and, good learnings as well.
That's amazing. I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to ask. It's wonderful to know about your journey, and information that you shared is invaluable. So I'm just so grateful to have you here. And yeah, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Yeah.